One of the biggest quarterback battles in the entire nation runs through Waco. Gerry Bohanon or Blake Shapen, who starts game one next year for Dave Aranda? This is Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Drake Toll here with SicEm365. Thanking you for making Locked On Baylor your first listen every single day. Find us free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. And today is a big day. I told you we're going to have the biggest guest in the history of Locked On Baylor on the show. I wasn't lying. Please welcome from CFB with J.D., J.D. PicKell.
Man, you're building some high praise. I got to now cash in this check that you've written for me. But man, I'm grateful to be on the show, and I'm grateful to be a part of the great work you're doing here, man. I'm fired up to talk some Baylor football with you.
Dude, I'm pumped. The old days, little up-tempo reunion, little blonde boys power half hour today. And that's what we're getting into to start is without further ado, there is a quarterback battle in Waco. And JD, I know you've kind of moved to, and I love keeping up with your content, to a national scale where you're covering quarterback battles across the country, athletes cross-country recruiting as well. But when you hone in on Waco and Baylor, is this one of the biggest quarterback battles out there?
It's such an interesting situation because outside of really one big game, one big stage, Gerry Bohanon played really well. And so I think people near the program, and again, I don't know this for a fact, but I would assume people closer to the program would say, hey, it's Gerry Bohanon's team. He did nothing to lose a starting job. But then you look at the tape from the Big 12 championship game, you saw Blake Shapen dinking and dunking and diming all over the field. It's like, well, hey, that dude can do a lot of things that number 11 can't. And so how much of a quarterback battle it is, man, I have no idea. But on paper, you have two very good quarterbacks. And if you're a guy like Blake Shapen, and you're probably good to play a lot of other places in the country, you would think, hey, I've probably earned my shot to have a chance at the starting job. So I don't know exactly how it sits as a battle, but for people like you and me, it feels like Blake Shapen should get a shot, right?
Yeah, at the very least, it's a really fun talking point because Shapen last season he had 86 attempts compared to Gerry Bohanon, who, started 9-10 games last season. But in those few games that Shapen got to step up, he had 600 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, 80 QBR, led the Baylor Bears to a Big 12 championship. So if you don't, and JD, I know you've seen this as an athlete and someone who played college football, when you have two really good athletes at one spot where only one shines, typically like the quarterback spot, how do you balance? Like, is it worth having a guy like Blake Shapen on the pine this season? Because it just feels like wasted talent.
It definitely feels like wasted talent. And I think if you're someone like Dave Aranda, you're saying, okay, phenomenal. I have arguably one of the best, if he ends up being the backup quarterback in Blake Shapen on my roster that I can plug and play if stuff goes down with how physical Gerry Bohanon is, how much they may choose to run him or not run him. And so obviously as a coach, you're saying, okay, we want to keep both guys on campus, want to ideally let Blake Shapen sit a year and let him come in next year, have it be his team. But in the age of the portal and in the age where coaches are recruiting the portal and recruiting guys that could potentially jump into the portal, it would make a lot of sense for Blake Shapen to say, hey, I want to go play college football right now and be a starter. I mean, we saw it with Jacob Zeno a season ago, didn't win the starting job at Baylor and said, hey, I can play right now. I have nothing but love for Baylor, but I can go play right now. And my future is ideally for myself being an NFL quarterback. And I can't do that being second string. And so in the age of the portal, in the age of I want to play right now, it would make sense for someone like Blake Shapen to want to do that. I don't think anybody would fault him in Waco, but I mean, we're just going to see if there's anybody that can keep both these guys on the roster, Drake, it's Dave Aranda, but it's just one of those things where it's such a huge question mark. Like it would not surprise me any way this shook out.
Now, JD, if I did my math correctly, Gerry Bohanon has a total of 3 years left at Baylor. And the reason why, he redshirted his first year, so that year's free. He's played 3 other years, but he's got a COVID year, a redshirt year, and his senior year too, all combined into one. Basically, if you say the words COVID year, the NCAA is going to let you play, for the rest of time if you really want to. So let's say Gerry Bohanon even has 2 years left of eligibility. If he's your guy now, how does Blake Shapen stay?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's something that I'm grateful I don't have to answer, but for Blake Shapen, with as much talent as he has, it's one of those questions like, hey, I don't know how much I need to stick around for a situation like this. When I mean, realistically, Blake Shapen has shown he is good enough to play at a lot of other college football programs, a lot of other Power Five college football programs. So it's not like he's going to have to transfer and play at some Group of Five and fight his way back to relevance. Like, he's a very viable option for a lot of other programs, and a lot of other programs would be very happy to have a guy like Blake Shapen on their roster. So I think it's a really great question and something that Shapen's going to have to answer for himself. I mean, I guess in a perfect world, if you're Dave Aranda, you have Gerry Bohanon play well this year, decide he's got a good enough draft stock to go and test the NFL waters and then Shapen's team the next year. But again, there's a lot of scenarios that all make sense. And at the same time, it would not surprise me if there were a lot of just weird things that happen in terms of like a round peg in a square hole, if you will. Like, hey,
Right.
Gerry Bohanon's going to play well this year, and then next year he's back and he wants to continue to improve his draft stock. So I don't think there's a perfect puzzle piece. We'll see how it shakes out, which is a pretty ambiguous answer, but I mean, we're just gonna have to wait and see.
Yeah, it's a bit of a Sophie's choice, but in football terms, when you have two guys who are at a Division One, Big 12, high caliber, starting caliber, and on the flip side, we mentioned Blake Shapen. If he's benched, what about Gerry Bohanon? Let's say that Shapen really ends up taking the spring game by storm, and in early practices next August, he is just balls to the wall for. That's a football term, right? That feels like very gridiron, Eric Mateos.
Sure.
And then you Gerry Bohanon, you sit a guy like that. Now you're wasting a guy who would be a all-star linebacker and quarterback.
Yeah, and it's someone like Gerry Bohanon who, this is no knocking Gerry Bohanon, but just the way that the game's played today probably has less transfer options than a Blake Shapen does, just because of the way people want to go and air it out. I mean, there's not a lot of people that are running the wide zone the way that Baylor is. And maybe there should be, but there's just not. So where do you fit in if you're Gerry Bohanon? Pro style isn't necessarily, what you want to jump into, or an air raid. And so a guy like Blake Shapen, it feels like he could play a lot of other places, but Baylor fits Gerry Bohanon really well, whereas Blake Shapen, I think, could fit a lot of places. So I don't know what that would look like if Gerry Bohanon were to sit. My instinct is he'd maybe go to, and this is not, I don't want to speculate too much and say what it would or wouldn't be for him in terms of the transfer market, because he's a Power 5 quarterback that won a New Year's Six Bowl game last year. So I don't know. That's a lot of I don't know so far for you, Drake. So I'm sorry, but
I think that's what comes. It's not really a quarterback. I don't even want to call it a battle, right? Like, this is a duel. This is two guys who are, really respectable teammates who have been at Baylor for a couple of years now that are duking it out. And where I'll leave you before we jump into just spring game preview is, because it's a week away. Yes. Is JD to tie the whole quarterback battle thing together. If you are in the mind of a coach, if you are Jeff Grimes, Sean Bell, and Dave Aranda, what is the best, most fair, surefire way to handle this right and with success in mind?
I think giving both players a fair shake, in the sense of, okay, we're going to evaluate you when it comes to the spring. We're going to, track every pass. We're going to track every decision you make. We're going to see how you do your job. And also, we're going to see how the offense does under the spring game. I mean, not just the spring game, but scrimmages and things like that, because what I think separated Gerry Bohanon a season ago from Jacob Zeno, and you and I talked about this at length, Gerry Bohanon, you put him out there and they do throwing drills in his shorts and a t-shirt, probably doesn't throw a whole lot better than Jacob Zeno, if at all, but he moved the offense substantially better. And we saw that time and time and again, especially in the spring game. And that's what I think allowed him to win the job. So I want to see success of the offense. If I'm Blake Shapen, though, I think you really have to do something spectacular, because to unseat a guy like Gerry Bohanon, who took a program from, they were a 2-win team before he became the starting quarterback, they're Big 12 champs, win a New Year's Six Bowl. All the guy did wrong was get hurt, sit 2 games, and watch Blake Shapen play really well. Like, the guy hasn't done anything performance-wise to say, wow, we don't need you at starting quarterback. So I think, to answer your question, look at the spring, but I think the weight or the burden of proof is for sure on Blake Shapen. It can't be a 50-50 neck and neck kind of thing, in my opinion.
I love it. Fair shake. Both you guys get in there, duke it out. Folks, before you get too upset, JD is not gone. He is certainly coming back. I just got to tell you about Built bar. So I know I've mentioned this a few times now. I had a New Year's resolution to eat right, and I am sticking to it. It is April 15th, and I'm going to stick to this resolution thanks to something called Built Bar. Built Bar is like a candy bar, except where candy bars have 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar. Built Bar has 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar. That's 26 grams of sugar difference. Dozens of net carbs in your average candy bar, only 4 in a Built Bar. They have these Built Bar puffs too. If you haven't tried it, you're missing out. The flavors range from they've got like kind of, I don't want to say exotic necessarily, but like mint brownie, coconut almond. This month is white chocolate cookies and cream. So if you don't like one, you're probably going to like the rest of them. They're delicious. New flavors coming out all the time as well. Get invested in the Built Bar. Just try it out. Go to built.com, use promo code LOCKED15. Again, that's built.com, promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. Promo code LOCKED15 at built.com. JD, man, it is football season-ish. Spring ball is, well, I don't know, it's almost past us now as we are a week away from Baylor squaring off against Baylor on the gridiron at McLean Stadium. I'm going to give it, cast a wide net here and see what we catch. What are you looking forward to most with a kind of football coming back to Waco this week?
The thing that I am most excited to see is Josh Fleeks moving from receiver to running back, because there's a big amount of production that's left there to pick up by that running back room from Abram Smith leaving. And I think Josh Fleeks, obviously I trust Ebner as well, but I think Josh Fleeks, for all of the natural ability he has, I am fired up to see him take a handoff on that wide zone, put his foot in the ground, get north and south. He is extremely shifty, and I think he's someone who could be a game breaker. So I'm so excited to see him get utilized, because he's someone that you've heard rumblings about year in and year out. I mean, even dating back 2019, he was the starting slot when you started fall camp under Matt Rule. And so for him now to make this shift, I think it makes a lot of sense, and I am really excited to see him finally jump into the starting lineup as just a continual bell cow for them, hopefully.
JD, is Josh Fleeks big enough?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know what he's weighing now. He's always a pretty sturdy guy. I want to say he was close to 190-ish, 200-ish. I think they had him on the roster. So he's not necessarily going to be someone that is going to carry it on 4th and goal. But for how shifty he is, for how quick he is, I think he'll do a good job not taking a lot of hits. Now, I don't think you probably give him the ball like you did Abram Smith. I don't think he's probably a 30 carry a game kind of guy. But if he can be someone who carries it 16, 17 times, throw him the ball 2-3 more times out of the backfield, again, if he ends up earning that starting role and earning that kind of a load, I think he's going to be able to have a play style to protect himself enough. But, I mean, they got a stable too. I mean, Tay McWilliams, Quaylon Jones is a big boy that we've heard a lot about ever since he's been on campus. So I'm excited to see this running back room pick up where Abram Smith and Treston Ebner sort of left off, if possible.
Squirrel's back too, which is
Squirrel
just
Williams,
inevitable. I remember in 2012 when we were saying Squirrel's back, sweet, wonder what he can do this year. And now 10 years later, he's still hanging around there. But JD, what I love is, let's say Josh Fleeks ends up being that bell cow for Baylor. At last count, he was 5'11", 190 pounds. On 4th and inches, I don't want Josh Fleeks going up the middle, but I do want 6'3", 220-pound Gerry Bohanon going up the middle, which you have at your disposal, which means you can go with a more lean, shifty running back for Baylor. And when it comes to JD, my biggest question probably would be the secondary of this Baylor team. I know wide receiver and secondary, 2 things have been thrown around a lot. And do you have any hope for me when it comes to the secondary?
If you do have hope, I think it's with Ron Roberts, right, and Dave Aranda. They're so good schematically, and they develop so well to where I feel confident in whoever their choice is. But anytime you lose guys like, Jalen Petrie, JT Woods, Raleigh Tejada, Kalen Barnes, those are guys that are just going to be so tough to replace. So it might look different. I think they'll be able to still do the job really well, but it might be more of a, hey, let's take this first game to 2 games to figure out who's going to be our guys to step up, get comfortable, because playing for the first time, it's going to take an adjustment. It just will. Spring game's fun. Spring ball's fun. Fall practice is fun. But until you play that 11 on 11, it's live football. Stakes are high. It's just a different game. So I'm excited for these young guys to get a shot. I think, probably take a second. But you're talking about defense, that second level with those linebackers with Josh White and Jones. They're going to be some studs, and I think hopefully pick up and allow for that secondary to have a little less pressure on them. But Drake, I'm gonna flip it on you. You're a Baylor guy. You're the expert, all things Baylor, man. What are you looking for in the spring game?
Oh, dude, spring game this year, I definitely think that linebacker core from Josh White to Matt Jones to Dylan Doyle, and you see how Jackson players, Siaki Ika, Gabe Hall, Garmin Randolph, Chidi Obanaya. I mean, those are names that I talk about football household names. If you're a Baylor fan, you have heard these names thrown around before. And so when you hear those names come back out, you're like, oh my gosh, they're all on roster and on the defense this year. So there are still questions in the secondary, but when you have your box, when you got 8 guys that could line up front and wreak havoc on somebody, you saw it against Ole Miss last year. Doesn't matter who played quarterback, you just had a box of guys that are going to come after you with that with just a different mentality. Siaki Ika leading the way too. I think I'm most excited for the defense, and then dude, how about that offensive line? You get 4 out of 5 guys returning. JD, you played college football. You carried the football. How crucial is it to have that kind of experience up front?
Oh, it's huge. Just to have guys that know what they're doing. I mean, to be on the same page as an offensive line is enormous because with the offensive line, so much of it is communication and cohesion and being able to really, like I said, being on the same page. Because if you have 4 guys doing their job and 1 guy not, well, you got a sack or you have a tackle for a loss or whatever it is. So to have 4 of those 5 guys back is enormous. I mean, Eric Mateus has got to be one of the best offensive line coaches in the country. He'll get whoever that 5th guy is ready to rock and roll. I love that he's also breeding competition and talking about, hey, we have 4 starters last year coming back, but this year we have no starters. And I think that's just a great quote. And so whoever's the best will play, but I think it'd be very surprising if we didn't see those same 4 in their spots as previous. And then whoever that 5th guy is, plug and play, baby.
Kind of the last question I want to pitch you here when it comes to the spring game, JD. Last year, coming out of it, if you'd have told me that Baylor was going to win 12 games after the spring game, it was like, did their entire schedule cancel and they're only playing Albany the rest of the year? But maybe that's kind of what spring is for, is to get those, you got a few kinks in the iron and you got to get them out. And I think it's how the saying goes. You got to get them out. You got to figure it out. Let's say Baylor's spring game goes disastrous. Does that give you any doubts about next season still?
It doesn't. You want to look good because it's your first dress rehearsal before a big before you jump into fall camp, and you just want to have a good taste in your mouth once you finish these 15 practices. But at the end of the day, it is still a practice. It's not live bullets completely. I'm assuming the quarterbacks won't be live. So if they look disastrous, it won't feel good. It'll probably be great for guys like you and I to talk about for the rest of the offseason. So maybe in that way it's a good thing. But I don't think there's a ton of reason to panic if there is some disaster.
Yeah.
All things considered, I think it's exciting. I think you know a lot of what you have. But if you see flashes, I think that'll be the most encouraging thing. I mean, we saw Gerry Bohanon flash a couple times in the spring game, and it was like, oh, he might be able to do some things and help Baylor. So I think you're looking for flashes more than you are perfection.
We talked about that during the college football postgame shows when we did the Baylor postgame shows, that in the 2-7 season too, it was almost more entertaining when they would lose last second. More people would call in, and so hopefully we don't have that issue next season. Boy, what a blast! What a little throwback right there. JD, I know that I'm super excited to have you on today. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and your friendship means a lot to me on and off the air. So, dude, this is just legit.
Dude, I appreciate you having me on. This is phenomenal. You do such a great job with this, and the people at Locked On are lucky to have you doing this. And man, I'm excited to hopefully come on again and talk some more ball with you and to keep this train rolling.
Easily. Now, I know you thought that I was going to cue you right out of here, but I'm not, because I got some Bear games for you, which have
Love
not.
It. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Have not been played yet on Locked On Baylor. So today's the day.
Let's go.
Your first couple, I just want yes or no answers. No analysis, just yes or no. Does Matthew Meyer come back?
No.
Does Jeremy Sohan come back?
No.
Does Baylor go to the transfer portal for a wide receiver?
Yes.
Does Baylor, as it sits right now, win more than 9 games in football next year?
Ooh, you're trying to get me in trouble here. I'll say yes.
Yeah. Wow. And then, JD, all I need is a name for these, because this was so much fun for me. Who is your favorite Baylor coach of all time?
David Aranda.
I love it already in 2 years. JD, the coach that you may have the most beef with. The question is dislike, but I'm just going to give you beef.
Most beef. That's a great question. Who do I have the most beef with as a coach?
There was a basketball coach in the early 2000s who was an appropriate answer.
I wasn't gonna. So I mean, yeah, that's like
low hanging fruit, but you can go there.
Gosh, this is a great question. I'm really thinking about this one. I'm trying to think of like a football coach that
there was an offensive coordinator.
I don't think
2 years ago. There was an OC a couple years ago.
Oh, yeah. You know what? That's a great call, Drizzy. This is why you're in charge here. I'm going to go Larry Fedora. Yeah, phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like, seemed like a great guy, but for what Baylor needs, probably not your guy.
Last two here.
Great assist there. I appreciate that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I knew there was one of those two in there. The coach that is the most underrated in Baylor history to you.
Ooh, most underrated. Joey McGuire.
Oh, I like it. And the GOAT, the greatest Baylor coach of all time.
It's got to be Scott Drew, right? It's got to be Scott Drew.
I mean,
I'm going Scott Drew. For my money, Scott Drew.
I'm not going to disagree. JD, thanks again for coming on, man.
Dude, I appreciate you. I love this. And hopefully I will see you again soon in not virtual setting.
Boom. You got it. Folks, before we roll into our next segment where Glenn Moore joins the show, head softball coach of Baylor, I want to tell you about betonline.net, your number one source for all things sports betting. You got stats, info, find the latest sports developments too. So league news, reviews. You got this year's basketball playoffs. NBA is going on. Major League Baseball. You can put some, fiscally responsibly put some monetary, insert a noun here on some games. BetOnline.net. You've got esports, live betting, and like Vegas style casino, which is pretty cool. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline.net, where the game starts. That's BetOnline.net. All right, we now welcome onto the show the head Baylor softball coach, Glenn Moore. But I want to thank you for making Locked On Baylor your first listen every day. Folks, the Baylor softball team has 2 games this weekend, Friday and Saturday against Sam Houston, and they're coming off of a series win, coach, against Kansas in Lawrence. What was the key to getting the first Big 12 win in a series this season? And I know those first 2, you can't ask for a tougher gauntlet in Series 1 and Series 2. So how nice is it for this team to pick up that vote of confidence?
Well, thanks for having me, Drake. It's good to be here, first of all. Appreciate it. Love to talk about my team. I really like this team from an outsider standpoint. Many people think that, we're disappointed, but we're such a young team. We're really basically a 2-year team with so many freshmen and sophomore. And we've tried not to rely on that or use that as an excuse, but many times the result is that we don't play consistently and we have mistakes that maybe you wouldn't make with a little bit more experience. We've had some things happen in our program that's caused us to move some kids out of position. So overall, I love the way this team comes to practice every day, the way they're expecting to get better. There's been many teams after an Oklahoma State weekend that would have thrown in the towel. And we competed in those games and had opportunities in those games, but we also had breakdowns in those games. And I was really hoping that it wouldn't affect us too much to head into the Kansas series, because I knew that was a series we could win, albeit on the road, and a series that our backs are against the wall and we needed to win. And I thought our approach was good. I thought we were prepared. And in all 3 games, we started out with in a hole. We dug a hole early. 2 of the games, as we've done many times this year, we made runs and came back and won those first 2, took the series. And luck ran out on the 3rd one, and we weren't able to come back. We didn't have outstanding pitching for the weekend. That was a little off. Pitching's been more consistent for us throughout the year and than it has, or at least lately. And, our hitting, we just didn't have the offense in game 3 to come back and win that one. Overall, you got to be happy with a series win on the road with such a young team, and something we can pull from and grow from, and I think we will.
Coach, looking at the season stats for Dari Orme and Makenzie Wilson, both, you picked those up out of the transfer portal to come to Baylor this season. They both started hot, and you're thinking, all right, when are these stats going to even out? And they haven't really. They both still got great numbers, especially Makenzie, who is just having an unbelievable year offensively and defensively. How has the spark from those two players ignited the team to where it is?
That's a good question. I'll start with Makenzie. We knew big things were going to happen with her. She's a kid that even out of high school, we knew was, hate to put this on her shoulders, but potential All-American material. And for her to have had 2 years off, COVID and then medical redshirt last year, we thought there would be, a lot of rust to knock off. But man, she hit the ground rolling. Couldn't wait to get back on the field and start competing. The consistency has been unbelievable. She's hitting over 400. She's got 5 triples, I believe. She's just a player, and she is a tough out. Throwing her outside a whole lot right now, and she's just mastered that. So once they start coming back in on her, you're going to see some balls leave the park. She hit a ball about 300 feet against Kansas that was just barely foul. But she, along with Dari, have brought leadership. They were at a program that had won at Fresno, and they've brought that mentality into our program, and they're not accepting the situation that we're in right now. They understand it. They understand that we're growing and we're a young team, but they're not happy with it from a competitive standpoint. And I think that leadership is contagious. And we've won here a lot anyway, so it should never be accepted here. But I think their leadership is just invaluable. For them to come in shows you how young we are. For them to come in and become leaders on this team so quickly as first-year players here says a lot about not only the youth of this team, but their leadership's ability as well.
Well, Coach, now coming into this weekend, you get this weird gap in Big 12 play where you see a team outside of the conference after going on the road to face Kansas, and sandwiched between seeing Texas Tech at home. Is this one of the stranger series of the year when this one pops up for the non-conference, or does it act as almost a breath of fresh air from the gauntlet that is the Big 12?
Well, I was concerned about it, Drake. We always want to have high RPI teams come in here and maybe even travel next year. For instance, we're going to travel to Tennessee during this week and play. But you got to kind of match your schedule with the age of your team and maturity of your team, and you got to have enough room to grow, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. And we felt we needed to, put a schedule together that would allow that. And coming off of the weekends that we've had, we're banged up right now. I was hoping to survive Oklahoma State with at least no injuries and a couple of wins. We didn't get the wins, but we certainly had a little bit of the injury bug take over. So we've got a couple of kids that are dealing with that. So this will give us an opportunity to have good competition and hopefully heal up at the same time.
When you look at the remaining Big 12 schedule too, and into the Big 12 tournament, the opportunity you have to play some of those bigger RPI games down the stretch, looking specifically at Texas to end the year, obviously getting back into that postseason race firmly is an uphill climb, but do you see the path right now? Is that something you're looking at?
Obviously, we're always looking at it. I've been coaching long enough to not be satisfied with just a winning season. We expect to be in postseason NCAA play every year. And right now we're on shaky ground. We need to win every time we step out on the field right now. And not many opportunities to improve our RPI. And you really don't know a ton about that because you don't know your opponents, even if they're, the record's not that good. And so much of it depends on the formula and how their strength of schedule and what that portion of it is doing. So it could be better than we think in a couple of weeks if we perform well, but we have to win. And all we can do is take care of our portion of it, and that's being prepared to win. And if we win, we could still finish, really could finish fourth in the Big 12. And it's been a long time since the Big 12 hadn't had at least 4 teams in the NCAAs. So I'm still optimistic, but we've got to focus small right now, one game at a time. Even this weekend, although it's out of conference, is huge. So from that standpoint, I still think the ball's in our hands, and we've got control of our own destiny.
I love it. Coach, thanks for coming on today. Look forward to having you again here in the next couple of weeks, and best of luck this weekend.
Thank you, Drake. Great to be here.
And folks, for those listening, thank you for making Locked On Baylor your first listen every day. Come back on Monday when Coach Felicia Mulkey of the Baylor Acrobatics and Tumbling team joins the show, and make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft with Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker, bringing the NFL Draft to life every day with insight analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. And I know Coach Moore is still right here. And the reason why I haven't queued him out, because I want to end on I'm going to throw you a softball here, pun intended. Yep. Coach, your son Ty was on the Baylor football team, and while he transferred out to get, that football bearings about him somewhere else, it's pretty unique where he transferred and why. Can you fill the folks in? Because I'd rather you tell the story than me.
Sure. Well, it was a blessing to be a part of Baylor football, and who knows, that may be in his future as well. But Baylor's pretty good, and he needed to get reps. He needed to get bigger and get stronger to be able to compete at a level like that. So he transferred out to a junior college back in Mississippi, and it just so happens that it's my alma mater as well, and my dad's and my granddad's. So he's a 4th generation there at Southwest Mississippi Community College. He's in the middle of spring training right now and doing really well. He's put on about 20 pounds since he's been there, and getting stronger and having a good time and doing well academically right now. So we're excited. He's back closer to my family, and many of them will get to see him play this next fall. So thanks for asking about Ty. He's doing really well right now.
I love it. Coach, thanks again. And folks, thank you for listening. We are free wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. This has been Locked On Baylor.